Healing from sexual betrayal is not something you're meant to navigate alone. Shock, confusion, and fear are common responses to an experience that can deeply disrupt your sense of safety. Welcome to Rise, Hope and Healing from Sexual Betrayal. I'm MaryAnn Michaelis, a licensed clinical social worker, certified sex addiction therapist, certified partner trauma therapist, and a recovering betrayed partner. Each week, we feature conversations with leading experts in betrayal trauma recovery, offering insight, validation, and practical tools to support your healing. If this episode supports you, please consider sharing it. You may help someone else feel less isolated and more understood. And if you're ready for additional support, we offer an online course and groups created specifically for betrayed partners. You can find these at humanintimacy.com.
And I am so excited to have you here in season 2, where we are talking about stabilizing after sexual betrayal. My lovely friend and colleague, Dr. Karen Strange, is here with us today. And Karen, I would love to have you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you, MaryAnn, for having me and for just all that you and Dr. Skinner have been doing to help betrayed partners. Like you said, I do have my PhD. I recently received that. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I work in the upstate of South Carolina. So I'm on the opposite coast as she. And I too am a betrayed partner. It was many years ago, long before there was ever even any inkling of a CSAT, certified partner trauma therapist. There were some really dark days and very little support. I did have a really good friend that walked with me through that, and her husband walked with my husband. Those were difficult years, and when I reflect on them, I can still get emotional about them. And at the same time, I can look back and appreciate the growth that it created in my life. And I believe also I can speak for what my husband would have said, and that is that it did create growth in his. And so we did a lot of healing work as a couple. Again, not with an emotionally focused therapist, not with some of the things that you and I consider best practice. But I got in touch with one of my colleagues, and she has a kintsugi bowl in her office. She gave me permission to share that with you all. And it's just this little thing, and maybe many of you are aware of this. It's a Japanese art form where you take a broken bowl and then it's pieced back together with lacquer with a beautiful metal in it. And so when it's pieced back together, it's actually more beautiful and more valuable than it was before. And for me, that metaphor is just really meaningful when I reflect all those years ago on what happened in my marriage.
Oh, Karen, I know it takes courage. And even after all these years, as you said, there's still some emotions that can show up. I'm so grateful to have these conversations because there's the lived experience as well as the now let me bring in the clinical. Now let's use some healthy tools, especially that kintsugi bowl for our listeners and viewers. It's spelled Kintsugi, and it's a Japanese form of pottery. And feel free to check us out on YouTube so you can see what Karen just shared. But in my own journey, I learned about kintsugi bowls. And as I shared with you just before we started, I heard this idea and thought, oh, I want to create my own piece of art. And I spent months just in the back of my mind when I'd go out shopping, I'd just look and think, is that a piece I want to use? And oh man, it took me 3-4 months until I found something and said, that's it. That's the one. And I took it home. I laid it on a dish towel. I put another dish towel over it. And for me, I was surprised at the emotional resonance of taking out a hammer and slamming it against this beautiful piece of pottery and watching it break.
Wow.
It probably took me about 6 hours to put back together. I tried several glues. They were the wrong glue. They didn't work. And then I'd purchased a couple different paints to line it with the gold like they usually do. And some worked and some didn't. And it was really this process. And it was so symbolic for me of coming from this broken place and trying this and then trying this. And this didn't work and this didn't work. And I think I bawled about that entire time. It was such an emotional release for me. And I was so shocked and surprised at what came out while I was doing it. So I love that concept. And as our listeners know, this podcast, several of our very first podcasts were about being shattered. And so, like that shattering of that kintsugi bowl, I think it really resonates with what we're talking about with betrayal.
Oh, yeah. So when I was talking to my colleague about the bowl, she sent me a little blurb that they think the history was of a Japanese individual who was a ruler who had broken a bowl, and he sent it to China to be fixed. And it came back and not pretty. It had a lot of metal on it, and there was nothing beautiful about it. And so he tasked his people with creating something beautiful from that. And so I just appreciated that it started out that they were just trying to cobble it together. But what he wanted was something redemptive that would be a reminder of the beauty of the bowl. And so I just think it's very metaphoric. And I am excited about seeing your bowl. I want to see it.
I love that. And I want to just make really explicit what you were saying. This journey is so shattering. There is beauty that can come from it. And that beauty, I think, is the growth that we see of going through something hard and learning new tools, learning more about ourselves, really having to dig really, really deeply to find our why. And these are all parts of the pieces of healing. And it's a journey and it takes time. And I can't tell you how many clients, including myself, looking back and saying, I have grown so much through this process. Is it something I would have wished for? Is it something that, man, I would have chosen? Absolutely not. It's been awful. And I really believe that I have grown. I think we grow through when we go through really hard things. And I know trees, the stronger the wind for trees, the deeper their roots go. And I think that's what we're talking about here is that stabilizing ourselves and figuring out what do I need to do now to pick up these pieces to create beauty from these ashes. So in our last podcast, as you're aware, Chris and I spoke about trust, about rebuilding trust in ourselves and that very basis of, am I even sure if I can trust my partner? Let's shift into looking at trust and then moving a little bit forward because I know you have really great exercise you're going to share with us as well.
Thank you for the opportunity. And I love that you and Chris have kind of paved the way with the importance of trust. And I always tell my clients, it's so important in healing that we learn to trust ourselves, that we learn to give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. When a person goes through gaslighting, when they're blamed, it can make that individual just feel like they're marinating in a toxic stew. They can't think straight, and they lose the ability to trust themselves. And so I think it's real important. I always tell my clients, I want you to first and foremost learn to trust yourself because chances are you wondered if something was wrong. Not everybody does. A lot of people are blindsided, and that's okay too. There's not a one size fits all. Whether you were blindsided or whether you suspected things through the years, honoring yourself, honoring your body. If something doesn't feel right, if you notice tightness in your chest, or maybe you catch your shoulders, a lot of times we hold our tension in our shoulders, and all of those things that I know y'all have spoken about in the somatic podcast that you all did, you want to honor that and be curious about that within yourself and start learning to say, okay, I think I might be onto something. I could be wrong. And if I am, that's okay. But I want to honor that in myself. And so that's just an important piece for me is that individuals learn to do that. It takes time in the relationship, even longer than for ourselves, to start rebuilding trust. And trust is not necessarily an emotion, but it's a cognitive process. And a lot of times I see the person with the problematic behavior, the addict, go, oh, I'm not doing it anymore. You should trust me.
Right.
Trying to push through the process. His shame is great. He just wants it to go back to the way she thought it was. But that's not realistic. And we want to invite her to take her time, because behavior over time will indicate whether he is trustworthy. And Brené Brown talks about an acronym that I would like to share. And I know I've heard you quote Brené Brown on the podcast. And if you don't mind me just diving into that, these things that our listeners can look to see, not only in their relationship with their partner, but in general, if someone is trustworthy. And Brené Brown uses the acronym BRAVING, BRAVING. And the B represents boundaries. And I know we could do probably 10 podcasts.
Yep.
Boundaries. So I don't want to dive too deeply into that. However, we need to know where our boundaries are, and we need to honor them. We need to know where we start and stop and where you start and stop.
I want to broaden that just a little bit, because I have colleagues or friends that come to me and say, I don't know how to do boundaries. Boundaries are so hard. So if this feels hard, which it does to most people, just make a list of what I'm not okay with. So I'm not okay with lying. I'm not okay with cheating. I'm not okay with dishonesty. Like, those are some good places just to start. So figuring out, okay, I'm not okay with these things. That's going to start helping you figure out what the boundaries are that you need. And in humanintimacy.com, I actually have a course that's been created specifically on how to create boundaries. And so if this is an area that you need some help in,
I encourage the listeners to take that course to get a better understanding. I also tell my clients, we're surrounded by boundaries everywhere. You know, we have lines on the road, we have locks on our door, locks on our windows.
Yeah.
We have doors, we have roofs. All of those are boundaries. We tend to struggle when it comes to the interpersonal boundaries. So certainly getting a better understanding of that in your course. Yay, y'all take MaryAnn's course at humanintimacy.com. So the R is reliability. And that's just the quality of, I do what I say I'm going to do. And you see that in other people that you're wanting to trust. They show up in the ways they say that they will.
And with that, Karen, I think reliability takes time. If I'm trying to see if my partner or spouse is reliable, like, yeah, okay, they did it today, but are they going to do it tomorrow? Or are they going to do it the next day? So that does take some time there. We're not looking and saying, like, okay, they did it once, so I should immediately trust. It takes time for us to feel safe and for our system to begin to settle. We start going, oh, okay, now I've got a consistent pattern that I can rely on, that I'm feeling better about.
Yes, I 100% agree. And I think you're right. We're talking about over time. And we're not talking about 2 months. It could be over several years that you see this growth.
Right.
So this is not a fast process, but it's something that I think is important for people to know, because a lot of times there is that push. Well, I'm telling you the truth now.
Sure, it doesn't make sense for our system to automatically go, great, I'm going to believe you immediately. It takes repeated patterns of consistency for us to start saying, okay, now maybe I can start to trust. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. The A in braving is for accountability. And that is where you're really going to see potential growth in your partner, is when they own their mistakes. They apologize with true sincerity, with brokenness, that I have done this, and also where they make amends. That repair piece is done. And that's critical in relationships, that we go and we make repair with people that we've hurt. So the accountability as well.
And I think, once again, it's going to take some time. This is a process.
Yes, and one of the things early on in recovery, I'm not criticizing them, but sometimes the addicts, they're checking boxes.
Right.
See, I did this. See, I did this. And that's why we're saying we're going to slow this down. And this is behavior over time, where you don't see the push to believe anything other than what you're experiencing.
We're talking about building trust with another person. We're also looking at building trust with ourselves. And I think part of that also is our intuition. Because if my partner's checking boxes, I've got to be able to start checking in with myself, listening to my body. Because as you alluded to earlier, our body is our best tool. It is built to help us get through this. If we can slow down and start listening, it's going to help us know, okay, yeah, they're checking the boxes, but everything feels the same like it felt before. Nothing feels like it's really changed or different. And that change, it's more of an openness and an understanding and a turning towards the partner and a tuning and trying to connect. Also, when we're talking about accountability, sometimes my clients will have a tendency to say, I want to know every single trigger you've had. I want to know every single thought that you've had. And I want to emphasize that does not help us feel safe. I want my clients to have transparency, and I want their partners who've acted out to have accountability, but I want them to have a sponsor. I want them to have a group. I want them to have a therapist where they're going and they're working through the muck that's going on. And then they're coming back to their partner and saying, I was struggling with something today, and here's the things that I did to work through it. That actually creates much more safety rather than here's all the triggers that I had, because that just re-traumatizes us over and over again.
Oh, 100%. And I love the importance, and that you're emphasizing the importance of the addict being in a 12-step group, having a sponsor, having other men that he can reach out to, and his therapist, and be accountable there as well. I tell my betrayed partners, you have a certain amount of real estate in your head.
Mhm.
I really want you to protect that real estate and put thoughts in there that are going to bring life to you. I sometimes use the example of squatters who go in and take over an abandoned home, and they just are living there rent free and usually not taking care of the property. And if we are demanding that our partner tell us every little thing, man, that's a lot for us to take in. And so I want people to be discerning and let some other people absorb that, so it doesn't all fall on you.
Yeah, so choose the squatting that you're allowing in your head.
Yeah, and let other people absorb a lot of it.
And part of that is I'm not hiding. There's no secrecy, there's no lies. That's what we are looking for to feel safe in our relationships. So that is the building of the trust that's occurring on a different level, because when we're looking at intimacy, I know you've talked about this before, but when we're looking at intimacy, that very basic bottom place is psychological. Are you there for me? Are you safe? Can I trust you? Is there honesty? And so that's what this accountability, I think, is really helping to cement. It is a safety.
Yes, I agree with you, and I think that behavior is a language.
Right.
You always trust behavior over words.
Mm.
And so notice that. It's about living in the present moment, paying attention.
Okay, so what's V, Karen?
V is for vault, VAULT, just like a vault at a bank that holds things, that's protected. And I'm not talking about jumping over anything. I'm talking about being discerning about who you share with. And Brené Brown says that we don't share experiences that are not our experiences to share. And I know that can be a little bit tricky, and I would love to hear how that fits in with betrayal trauma and with the addict. I would love your thoughts.
This is an area that I feel so passionate about because as a betrayed partner and my own personal experience, I didn't feel like I could share my story anywhere. I felt like I could not talk about this and I had to keep it quiet for decades. And that is so incredibly damaging in so many ways. And so that's part of what comes behind my fiery passion about this of like, no, you have the right to share your story with anyone that you feel that you need to share your story with at any time. Now, my story is different than my husband's story. He has his own story. And I have a story about how his behaviors impacted me in my life. And I believe I have a right to share that story. One of the things that's been super helpful in my healing is, as uncomfortable as that has been for him at times, he has said, you need to share wherever you need to share. I want you to be able to do that. boy, that creates a lot of trust. That creates a lot of freedom for me. Earlier on, we just didn't have the words or the language, or we didn't even know what to call this. And so that didn't happen initially. And usually that hesitancy comes from shame. And oftentimes betrayed partners have a lot of shame. Oftentimes betraying partners have a lot of shame. And that's where we can really get stuck. I also want to emphasize, I think it can be really helpful in some situations. If I have a really good relationship with my family and my family members are noticing, hey, MaryAnn, what's going on? These things don't seem quite normal. I have some choices here. I can either lie, say,
Mhm.
oh, it's fine. Or what would be really healthy would be for my spouse or partner to say, hey, family members, I need to let you know that I've made some choices that have really hurt my spouse or partner. And I am working on them and we are working through these, but they really need so much support right now because of my choices. So can you be aware and can you help with that? I can share that with a boundary place that I'm not spilling all the details, but I'm also creating that safety for my partner to have that support. So just one other aspect of that, a part of that vault is that I get to share what's mine. I get to share what's yours.
I agree with you that you get to share your experiences
Right.
that you each do.
Brené says we have to choose our audience
Mhm.
and we have to look at what is my purpose of sharing. Am I sharing my story standing on a stage and the limelight's on me and there's a big spotlight and I'm saying, hey, give me all your attention, look at me? That's not usually the reason why we want to share. So we need to use some boundaries around speaking. So that's that vault of saying, where do I share this? And making sure that our motivation is appropriate.
And certainly having trustworthy people that you can share with is important. And a lot of times people find that in their groups or a 12-step program or with family members that would understand.
Oh, yeah.
I do agree with you.
Yeah. And I think that part is so tricky. You've probably seen this as much as I have, where maybe I share with a friend or a family member and I find out they're not trustworthy.
Mhm.
And this is where I really think groups are so helpful because people who are showing up to group, they're in the same boat and they are looking for support as well. And they're usually equipped to give and receive that support. Whereas my other family and friends may not speak the language, they don't understand it, and it might impinge on their relationships with my partner as well.
Thank you for just amplifying that and bringing
Mm.
out some of your experience with that. I think that's real important for the listeners to hear and understand. So the next one is I
Right.
for integrity. And we choose courage over comfort and we choose to do what's right, even if it is uncomfortable and even if it's inconvenient. And so that's another behavior that you can watch for in that long continuum of rebuilding trust is looking for signs of integrity.
Mm. And I think that so easily fits into that reliability and the accountability and the vault. These are all building that psychological safety that I'm here for you because I am impeccable with my words and my actions.
Yeah. And the next one is the N is being non-judgmental. And she makes the comment that we can both ask for what we need without feeling the fear of being judged, having the freedom to state what you need to feel safe in this process of rebuilding. And that's an important piece as well.
That non judgment is so crucial. I don't think we can talk enough about that because this is where I'd say most of my clients are like, oh, I can give non judgment to people in my group all day long. I can support them. But when it comes to me, And that's usually because we have so much shame
Mhm.
and our pain is so deep and our brain is trying to figure out how did this happen? And it must be my fault. There must be something wrong with me. I must not be worthy. And that's our shame speaking. We judge ourselves because our brain is trying to find a solution. If there's a reason that makes sense, then I can solve that and my brain can move on. If not, I get stuck there. So, this non judgment space is super hard and it's super important. Giving ourselves kindness and compassion and saying, this is hard. This is suffering. And anybody who has experienced this would probably feel this way.
Mhm.
I think that's so important.
And going back to the self-compassion, there's 3 components of that: the self-kindness, the mindfulness, and recognizing we're all part of a common humanity. And I think one of the things I really try to emphasize with my clients is that mindfulness piece and becoming aware of our self-talk.
Yeah.
And if I'm saying unkind things to myself, it's like you said, your clients very quickly will give everybody else a lot of grace and compassion, but for themselves, it's like a different standard. And it's an invitation to really start listening to that script, what we default to, maybe calling ourselves names or saying we're so fill in the blank or we're not so whatever, and asking yourself, is this true? And the answer to that is, that's not true. And so if you wouldn't say it to your best friend, then I would encourage you not to say it. But that requires a certain degree of being willing to pay attention to what you're saying in your head about yourself.
Right. And I would add one more question onto that. When you
Okay.
say, is it true?
Hmm.
A lot of times we're like, yep, that is true. And so the second question I would add onto that is, are you sure that it's really true? Like, can you know for sure that it's true? Because oftentimes we just pass that first judgment. Yep, it's true. And then when we push and go, hmm, can you be really 100% sure? Then we start saying, wait, oh. And when we really start to critically look at it, suddenly we see, maybe that's not. And I think it opens that door to doubt, which I think is where we can start to let a little bit of hope come in as well.
Hmm. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
So the final letter is G. And the letter G represents generosity. And I'm not necessarily talking about money or anything like that, but it has to do with extending the most generous interpretation possible to the intentions and the words and actions of others. Again, this is trustworthiness on a continuum. So, this is not something that you would necessarily at first be able to do. So, you want to be really careful as you go through these letters and this process of rebuilding trust to not try to hurry it up.
Mm. And oh yeah, let me come on that. If Dr. Skinner would hear, he'd probably have this great quote from Thich Nhat Hanh
Yes.
about it, which I don't have any just at the top of my head, which I'm just acknowledging. So,
Yes. Nor do I.
and that's okay. You get
Yeah.
other people nuggets from us. And I think that ties so much into something that Dr. Gottman talks about called positive sentiment override. In a relationship, when we have positive sentiment override, what that really means is when you do something, I look at that through a lens of maybe they've had a bad day.
Mhm.
Like, kind of we give the benefit of the doubt. And I want to validate. We're talking about building trust with ourselves. Can we give ourselves, oh, maybe you had a really bad day. Maybe that was really triggering. So there's that part of it. And so that generosity with ourselves. And I just want to underline and underscore that when we are trying to determine whether or not my partner is trustworthy and they're trying to build trust with us, that one's a little trickier. And I think that does maybe go back to the marbles in the jar.
Mhm.
Because yes, I want to be generous, but I might have been burned so many times that it's going to take a lot for me to get to that place where I can really just say, oh, they're having a bad day. Because as a betrayed partner, my body is going to say, something's going on, Mayday.
Mhm.
So I may have a tendency to freak out a little bit. So that's where I think I want to bring that back to generosity with myself. MaryAnn, you've been betrayed. MaryAnn, your body is set up to have some fire alarms go off when this happens. And it's okay that you're responding like that. Anybody else in this situation would probably react the same way. I think that generosity from a betraying partner can be, yes, they've been super betrayed. I've created a lot of behaviors that have created this in them. I can be generous and I can set myself aside and practice some compassion, being with them and holding their pain. I think that's part of this equation as well. But what do you want to add on to that?
Well, the things that we're talking about all can be applied to ourselves first.
Right.
Every one of them, the boundaries, the reliability, the accountability, the vault, the integrity, the non-judgment, the generosity, all that needs to be put in place first, really, because we've had so much of that. We've been knocked out at the knees.
Yeah.
And again, going back to that wonderful concept of self-compassion that Kristen Neff really emphasized, and appropriating those three components, the self-kindness, the mindfulness, recognizing we're part of a common humanity, all to ourselves first. And that can be the lens that we start seeing things through.
No, Karen, this has been such a lovely conversation, and I love everything that you've shared today with us about braving and who you are, your story. And I'm super excited to have you joining us throughout this next season moving forward. What are your final thoughts? Any messages, wrap up thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners and viewers?
Yeah, MaryAnn, thank you for having me today to share with the listeners and to be a part of something so profound and letting individuals know that there's a lot of hope. There's hope for healing, for wholeness, and it takes time. Time is your friend here. And I know that that's hard for people to wait, but you can actively wait. You can actively be doing things as you are relearning how to trust yourself and eventually, hopefully, your partner, if that were to be the case. But again, time is your friend. And you notice that. I use the illustration a lot. I don't know if any of you have ever been on a flight where there's a storm down below and you are in a holding pattern, and that can be pretty monotonous and long. And it takes a little while before the tower tells the pilot that he can land. And you don't want to land too quickly because you could be in danger. And you want to even make sure that as you are landing, that the runway would be clear. The tower can let you know. And so I do tell people, you just take your time. Be gracious to yourself. Speak life into your soul that you are strong and you are resilient and you deserve healing and wholeness. And thank you for letting me be here again, MaryAnn.
Oh, such beautiful thoughts. Thank you so much, Karen. It's just been a delight to have this conversation with you. I think my wrap up conclusion would be amen to everything that you've shared. That you just expressed so many of my sentiments already, but just giving our listeners and viewers a couple of takeaways. There's two, because I'm channeling my Dr. Skinner here. So I've got two
Okay.
exercises. So the first one would be just to write down BRAVING and to look at what do I need to do in these areas that we've talked about today to rebuild my relationship with myself. So that's the first exercise. And this is cognitive. These are things we've been talking about. And as you said earlier, these are things that we can actively do. The second invitation I'd like to extend is to go to self-compassion.org, which is Kristen Neff's website. And there under practices, there are a lot of different exercises. There are some meditations. So you can say, I've got 15 minutes or 5 minutes. So I would love to encourage you to spend some time practicing daily self-compassion, because that is one of the stabilizing tools of stepping out of the shame and rebuilding that trust with ourselves, validating where we've been. And thank you, Karen, for your time. And if this has been helpful, we encourage you to share this. We encourage you to hit like so that it can help our algorithms. Our passion is just to help other individuals who have experienced trauma to find hope and healing afterwards. So thank you.
Thank you, MaryAnn.